This is your Marijuana Cultivation Cannabis Podcast. I'm your host, Steven Glansberg, coming from James A. Garfield Studios as always. We are so glad you are here. Today, we are diving into a few hot topics that every grower, enthusiast, and cannabis aficionado needs to hear. If you're new here, welcome. And if you're a returning listener, you know we don't just skim the surface. We go deep into the weeds, man. In today's episode, we'll start by busting some of the most persistent myths in cannabis growing. There's a lot of misinformation out there, bro science, and it's time to set the record straight. Now, by record, I mean Steven Glansberg's opinion. So, email me at contactmccpod@gmail.com if you disagree with anything we talk about here. And we're going to be talking about a lot of different myths or bro science things that people feel strongly about, including me. So I'm sure you're going to disagree with some stuff. So shoot me an email and I would love to hear your thoughts, and maybe I'll learn better information and change my methods as well. That's why we're here, right? All right. So after that, I wanted to talk about how we can maximize our yield in small scale home grows. I think the average person listening to this podcast is probably doing that. So I was thinking, why don't we maximize the space that we have and do a segment on that? And then lastly, for whatever reason, and I'm not from there, I don't even know if I've ever been there, but Ohio, all you Ohioans, I am very pleased with you. By far, the most downloads in the US come from that state. So we're going to do a deep dive into all things Ohio cannabis related. So that's going to be fun, and we'll do that last, just in case. If you're not interested in the Ohio stuff, you can turn it off before we get there. So that'll be last. Super pumped for this episode. Like I said, super happy to have you. We need every one of you on this little earth of ours. And let's get into the show. So like I mentioned, we are going to be talking about busting those cannabis growing myths. First, and the probably most controversial of these myths, is flushing. It seems like for the longest time, I was hearing that we should be flushing our plants at the end of the growth cycle, 10, maybe 14 days before chop. And that kind of gets all the nutrients and, whatever bad stuff you don't want in your plant to get flushed out of your final product before you chop it. That has come against some studies as of late that show that actually flushing isn't doing anything. And if you think about it, are you really able to pull a bunch of shit out of your plant in 10 days just by having it drink plain water after it's been absorbing your nutrients for 120 days or whatever it may be? So in a nutshell, we've been flushing forever, and the science that has come out as of late shows a better profile with the cannabis that was not flushed, where it got newts up until harvest, than the cannabis that was flushed. Now, I'm going to be hypocritical on the first one. I still flush. I can't get over it. I still think it tastes better when I flush. I've done A/B tests. I almost think there's something to stressing the plant too. and I didn't come up with that idea. I heard it from Dr. MJ Coco. And I think the reason he flushes is something to do with stressing the plant right at the right time. And, we're just stressing it a little bit with still getting water and all that good stuff. And whatever reason, that stress response produces more resin. So combined with my own experience and bias and what Dr. MJ Coco says, I still flush. However, that flies in the face of the science. So I don't know how to square that circle. Email me, contact mccpod@gmail.com if you can. But we started off with the juicy one, right? Next, bigger plants mean bigger yields. It seems, intuitive, but it's actually not necessarily true. Our yield is going to be more closely related to the plant's overall structure, light exposure, and the growers. I always struggle with that word, and that's not good for this line of work. Growers' ability to optimize these factors. A plant that has been carefully trained using techniques like topping, LST, and scrog can yield more than a taller, untrained plant. And the reason is because these training techniques will create an even canopy, which allows the light to reach all your bud sites more effectively. And on the other hand, an untrained plant might have a tall central cola, but the lower buds will receive less light and develop poorly. I know when I first started growing and I was growing autoflowers to start with, I was really kind of disappointed at the size when I was like getting into flowering. And I'd envision these tall cannabis plants, and my yield ended up being like 150 grams from one auto, which I was super pumped with, and it was great weed. So don't be afraid to go for the bushier plants, especially indoors. And then another factor to consider is your strain. So some strains will naturally grow tall and lanky, while others are more compact and bushy. Understanding the growth characteristics of your chosen strain is crucial for maximizing yields. Indica dominant strains, for example, tend to stay shorter and denser, making them ideal for smaller spaces, whereas sativa dominant strains may require more vertical space but can be managed with proper training techniques. So the bottom line is your plant size alone doesn't determine yield. It's really about how effectively you can use your space, get that even canopy, get that light, and use good newts. Another myth, more light equals better growth. So it's true that, your plants do need a lot of light to thrive. There is a common misconception that the more light we have, the better our plant is going to grow. The reality is there is a limit to how much light a plant can use, and exceeding this limit can actually cause damage to your plant. So, obviously with light burn, but other ways as well. They have a maximum light intensity threshold, and past that, they cannot photosynthesize, so they can't eat. And when we go past that, we do get that light burn. You'll see your leaves start to look like they're almost bleached or kind of turning white. And then what's more than just this superficial issue, it actually will stress the plant, and that can lead to nutrient deficiencies. And then you get your reduced yields. So it's really important to monitor your light levels. Use a power meter if you can. Otherwise, check your manufacturer's guidelines. They'll often have a guide as to what you want to do with your lights. What I follow for most of my lights is I keep them 18 inches above my canopy at all times, and then I vary the power depending on the growth stage. So it's a dynamic light placement. I move it up every so often when the plant gets taller, and I just keep it up at that 18 inches all the time. Another thing we want to consider is the spectrum of light we're using. So it's, tempting just to focus on the intensity. we have to focus also on the quality, right? So full spectrum LEDs, which mimic the natural sunlight, are ideal for cannabis growing because they provide the necessary wavelengths for both vegetative and flowering stages. And that's what the data shows. But again, old school growers will like their old school lights and say that the shit under LEDs does not taste the same as their weed. So, again, that's probably to each their own. I've been in the LED space for a lot longer than the old style of lights. And I never could taste the difference. And at this point, it's all I know. So another myth that we want to bust is that you can't reuse your soil. It's true that soil can become depleted of nutrients and may harbor pests or diseases, but with the right care, soil can be rejuvenated and reused for multiple grows. So one of the most effective ways that we can do this is adding organic amendments like compost, worm castings, and bat guano. These amendments will reintroduce essential nutrients and beneficial microbes into the soil, creating a healthy environment for your plants. Some growers also use cover crops like clover to add nitrogen back into the soil during the off season. Before reusing soil, it's important to flush it thoroughly with water to remove any excess salt or nutrient buildup. You should also sterilize the soil by heating it to around 180 degrees for a half an hour to kill any pests or pathogens. Once your soil has cooled, it is ready to be amended and used again. So it not only saves you money, but it reduces waste, making it an eco-friendly option for those eco-conscious growers out there. Just make sure to monitor your plants closely during the next grow, as reused soil may have slightly different nutrient levels than fresh soil. Our next myth: organic cannabis always better? Obviously, it has a lot of appeal, especially of those, again, who are concerned about the environment. It's not the most sustainable thing for us indoor growers, but we're playing the hands that we're dealt in in terms of the government, right? But the idea that organic cannabis is always better is a bit of a myth. You can get really good bud from both organic and synthetic growing methods. And they both have their pros and cons, resulting in different buds, and might be really good for one person and might be really bad for another person, right? The best choice depends on your specific goals and circumstances. Organic growing, obviously, again, is praised for its sustainability, and the quality of the final product is often pretty nice. Organic nutrients such as compost, teas, and fish emulsion can enhance the flavor and aroma of your buds. It seems kind of nasty, but it's true. And organic practices also promote healthier soil, which can lead to a more vigorous plant over time. However, organic growing can be more challenging, especially for beginners. Organic nutrients are often less concentrated and slower to act than synthetic ones, making it harder to correct deficiencies quickly. Additionally, organic growing requires a deep understanding of soil biology and nutrient cycles, which can be overwhelming for new growers and veteran growers alike. On the other hand, synthetic nutes are designed to be easily absorbed by the plants, allowing for faster growth and bigger yields. And our hydroponic systems, which often use synthetic nutrients, offer precise control over the growing environment, leading to consistent results. While some argue that hydroponically grown cannabis lacks the flavor and complexity of organic weed, others find it smoother and more potent. Ultimately, the choice between organic and synthetic comes down to personal preference and growing style. Both methods can produce high-quality cannabis when done correctly. Another myth that we might have as new growers is more nutrients must mean more growth. It's easy to fall into the trap of that thinking, but it actually can lead to some serious problems. Our plants require a balanced diet of macronutrients, our nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, our NPK, and micronutrients, calcium, magnesium, iron, etc. to thrive. However, these nutrients need to be delivered in the right amounts and at the right times. Overfeeding can lead to nutrient burn, where you get, the tips of your leaves kind of turn brown and crispy. And this not only stunts growth, but can also reduce the quality of your final product. Nutrient lockout is another risk associated with overfeeding. And this happens when one nutrient prevents the plant from absorbing the others, leading to deficiencies. An example of this would be like too much potassium can sometimes block the uptake of calcium and magnesium, resulting in a condition known as calcium lockout. To avoid overfeeding, it's important to follow a nutrient schedule and adjust based on the specific needs of your plants. And one thing I forgot to put in my notes here, but just came to mind, is we also might overfeed when our pH is off if we don't realize our pH is off. Maybe our pH pen isn't calibrated correctly. Maybe we're not measuring pH at all. I know when I first started growing, I thought if I just used distilled water or RO water for all my mixing, I didn't have to worry about pH. That was dumb, so I obviously instantly had problems, but I was able to recover from it. I don't know why that's relevant, but now you know. So, make sure that we're testing the nutrients before they're going into the plant, and that might take care of our problems and get that, nice green color we're looking for without having to add more nutrient solution. All right, next, we are going to talk about the secrets of small-scale, high-yield home grows. Now that we've debunked some of the most persistent myths in cannabis growing, let's move on to one of the most rewarding aspects of home cultivation, maximizing your yields in a small space. Whether you're working with a grow tent, a closet, or a small room, it's entirely possible to achieve impressive yields without needing a massive setup. Here's how. Start with the right strains. Choosing the right strain is the first step toward a successful small-scale grow. Not all cannabis strains are created equal, and some are better suited to small spaces than others. When selecting a strain for your small grow, consider factors like the plant's height, flowering time, and yield potential. Indica-dominant strains are generally a good choice for small grows because they tend to stay short and bushy. These strains naturally have a more compact structure, making them easier to be managed in confined spaces. Some popular indica strains for small grows include Northern Lights, Granddaddy Purple, and Afghani. These strains are known for their resilience, potency, and ability to produce dense, resinous buds. Autoflowering strains are another excellent option for small spaces. Unlike photoperiod strains, which require a specific light cycle to trigger flowering, autoflowers will automatically start flowering after a certain period, regardless of the light cycle. This makes them incredibly versatile and well-suited to small grows, and they tend to stay shorter, making them perfect for growers with limited vertical space. Then we're going to want to maximize our space with training techniques. So once you've selected the right strain, our next step is to make the most of our available space using these training techniques. Training allows your plants to fit into your space easier because we're able to control their shape and their size, and that ensures that it'll fit within our grow area, maximizing the number of bud sites. Another thing we can do is topping. Topping involves cutting off the top of the plant to encourage it to grow more horizontally rather than vertically. This creates multiple main colas instead of just one, which can lead to a more even distribution of light and ultimately higher yields. Something that we've talked about in this podcast a lot is having that even canopy. It seems to come up over and over again in a lot of the topics that we go over. And again, it's coming up here. We're topping to get that even canopy. Topping should be done during the vegetative stage, typically after the plant has developed 4 to 6 nodes. And then after topping, the plant will focus its energy on developing the side branches, leading to a bushier, more productive plant. And with photos, there's really no limit to this. We can keep topping kind of as long as we want to. So that's kind of a cool deal. With autoflowers, top with caution, maybe only do it once. That's my 2 cents. And again, we're going to talk about low stress training, which involves gently bending down and tying the branches to create an even canopy. This technique allows all parts of the plant to receive equal light, promoting uniform bud development. And that's exactly what we're going for. Again, that even canopy theme. And it's particularly useful in these small grows because it helps the plant's height stay at a reasonable level. And it also will, again, maximize light exposure to all bud sites. So how are we going to do this? We're going to use soft plant ties or garden wire to gently pull the branches down and secure them to the sides of your pot. And then over time, the plant will naturally start to grow in a more horizontal pattern. Another technique that we can deploy is called screen of green or scrog. The scrog method takes LST to the next level by using a screen or net to spread out the plant's branches horizontally. So as your plant grows, the branches are woven through the screen, creating a flat, even canopy. This technique is highly effective in small spaces because it ensures that every bud site receives optimal light exposure. To set up a scrog, place a screen or net about 8 to 12 inches above your plants. As the plants grow, guide the branches through the screen, making sure to fill the entire grid. This method not only maximizes light exposure, but also improves airflow, reducing the risk of mold and mildew. Email me at contactmccpod@gmail.com if you do this. I always get frustrated when I do this because I want to spin my plants. I want to expose different areas to light. And when I do this, my plants ends up being stuck in that net, right? I can't do anything if I'm scrogging it. So how do you deal with that for those of you that scrog? Email me, please. So in these smaller spaces, our environmental optimization is probably even more important than with bigger spaces. We don't have a lot of room for error. And in a lot of ways, our weed plants are very hardy. They're weeds. We always say they can grow. But at the same time, they are sensitive to their surroundings and they can react to even like slight changes in temperature, humidity, and airflow. So a lot of times when you're reading different grow guides, you'll just see the word gradual a lot. Like, okay, then we're going to start moving our RH down 5% every so often and do a mild drop into our flowering as an example, versus just bumping down to 40% RH as soon as we flip the lights type deal. Again, temperature control. We've talked about this before, but I know not everyone has listened to every episode. So our cannabis plants are going to thrive in temperatures between 70 and 85 during the day and can handle about a 10-degree drop at night, ideally. If the temperature gets too high, your plants can become stressed, leading to slower growth and reduced yields. But on the other hand, if it gets too cold, the plants may go into shock and stop growing altogether. So we want to maintain a stable temperature. And how we do that is investing in quality grow tents with good insulation and ventilation. And we're going to use fans to circulate the air and prevent hot spots. And we're going to consider adding a heater or air conditioner if necessary. There's going to be a lot more purchases than we probably expected when we got into growing. Okay, between the dehumidifier, supplemental lighting, There's just a lot of heaters, air conditioners. There's just a lot of machinery that maybe we didn't think about when we first got in. So once you get over that, you're smooth sailing for a while if you buy good stuff. But it does suck initially. We're going to want to manage our humidity, especially in small spaces. Again, we don't have much room for air. During the veg stage, cannabis plants prefer humidity levels of 40 to 60. And in the flowering stage, we want to lower that RH between 40 and 50. And this will prevent that mold and mildew that's going to really make us mad because we spent so much time and at the final hour, everything got messed up, right? So again, we're going to need those dehumidifiers or humidifiers as needed. And make sure your area is well ventilated. I've mentioned this before, but I like having an air purifier, especially in my dry rooms, but also in my grow rooms. I think there's just something that having the air constantly flowing through a carbon filter prevents, whatever causes mold. And I'm not a scientist, so I don't know what that is, but it just seems like I haven't had mold issues and I've always just had air purifiers going. And could just be coincidence, but I ain't going to fix it if it ain't broke yet. But email me at contactmccpod@gmail.com if that's just my own bro science. Thank you. And then we're going to talk about lighting now, which is probably the most important factor in determining the success of your small space grow. Every watt of light needs to be used efficiently, so let's choose the right setup. So we got our LEDs for small spaces, and again, they're an excellent choice for small scale grows because they're energy efficient, produce less heat, I'm always paranoid about fires, and offer a full spectrum of light that can support both the vegetative and flowering stages. And the modern LED lights that we have these days in the year of our Lord 2024 are designed to deliver the optimal wavelengths of light that cannabis plants need, from blue light during the vegetative stage to red light during flowering. Because LEDs run cooler than traditional HID lights, they can be placed closer to the plants without risking light burn. However, the issue with this, at least personally for me, is knowing where to place my lights without a monitor, because we used to be able to do the, skin to the light test, where if it was too warm on our skin, we knew the lights were too close to our plants. Now that doesn't work because these LEDs are so efficient and they don't produce so much heat. When you are purchasing said LED lights, aim for one that provides about 30 to 40 watts per square foot of grow space. And then we're going to want to position our lights properly. We want even light distribution across your hopefully even canopy. In small spaces, our goal is to keep the lights as close as possible to the plants without causing light burn. So we're going to start by hanging our plants about 18 to 24 inches above the canopy and gradually lower them as the plants grow. And if we can, we want to use a power meter to measure the light intensity at different points in the canopy and adjust the height of your lights as needed to maintain optimal PPFD levels. Meh. Boring. Reflective surfaces are another way that we can maximize our small space. So we can line the walls of our grow space with reflective material like mylar or panda film. And that's going to reflect the light back onto the plants. And then we don't waste any light. This is especially important in small grows where every lumen counts. Reflective surfaces can help increase the overall light exposure, leading to a better bud development and higher yields. And everyone's favorite topic, harvesting and curing. They are just as important as the growing itself. Even if we've done everything correctly up to this point, improper harvesting and curing can significantly reduce the quality of your final product. So we have to know when to harvest. And this will produce the best potency, flavor, and yield possible, which we have little room for error of in a small grow. The optimal time to harvest is when the trichomes, those tiny crystal-like structures in the buds, have turned from clear to milky white with a few turning amber. If we harvest too early, the buds will be less potent and have more of a green taste, and harvesting too late, on the other hand, can lead to a more sedative effect as more of the THC has converted to CBN, which is a thing that's going to help us sleep. Banana. And then with our drying process, that is critical to preserving our terpenes, doing it right, that is. We're going to want to hang them upside down in a dark, well-ventilated room with a temperature of 60 to 70 degrees and a humidity of 50 to 60 RH. The drying process typically takes, 7 to 14 days, depending on the size and density of the buds. And during this time, we got to remember to keep the environment stable to avoid drying the buds too quickly, which can lead to a harsh smoke, loss of flavor, and the dreaded haze smell. And then we move on to curing. Once the buds are dried to the touch and the stems snap rather than bend, it's time to move on to curing. Curing allows the remaining moisture in buds to redistribute evenly, enhancing the flavor, potency, and smoothness of the smoke. Place the dried buds in airtight glass jars, filling them about 3/4 full. Store the jars in a cool, dark place and open them daily for the first week to release excess moisture. After the first week, you can reduce the frequency of opening the jars to once every few days. Curing can take anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, but the longer you cure, the final product will be better. Some growers cure their buds for several months to achieve the best possible flavor and potency. Next, we're going to be pruning, and another thing we can do during our grow is prune and defoliate correctly in our small spaces. These techniques help manage the plant structure and improve light penetration and reduce the risk of mold and pests. So when we prune, that's going to involve removing unnecessary branches and leaves to focus the plant's energy on the main bud sites. By cutting away lower branches that receive little light, you can redirect that plant's resources to the upper buds, leading to bigger and denser colas. Pruning is best done during the vegetative stage, but can also be done early in the flowering stage if necessary. But make sure not to remove too many leaves at once, as this can stress the plant. And then defoliation is going to be where we're removing those big fan leaves that block the light from reaching the lower bud sites. This technique is especially useful in small spaces where light penetration can be an issue. Defoliation also improves airflow through the canopy, reducing the risk of mold and mildew. However, like pruning, defoliation should be done carefully to avoid stressing the plant. It's generally recommended to defoliate during the late vegetative stage and again about 2 weeks into flowering. And what are some advanced techniques that we can do with our small grows? Well, we can do a sea of green, or a SOG. This method involves growing a large number of small plants in a small space rather than a few large plants. This technique is ideal for growers who want to maximize their yields in a short amount of time. By focusing on the main cola of each plant and minimizing vegetative growth, you can achieve a fast turnaround and high yields. And SOG works best with clones or auto-flowering strains that stay short and uniform. Another technique is mainlining. That involves creating a symmetrical structure with multiple colas. This is achieved by topping the plant early in the vegetative stage and then training the branches to grow horizontally. But remember, mainlining can be time-consuming and requires careful attention, but it can lead to massive yields from a single plant. And this technique is particularly useful in small spaces because it allows you to control the plant's height and maximize light exposure. Another technique is supercropping, which is a high-stress training technique that involves bending and damaging the plant stems to create a stronger and more resilient branch. This technique can increase the plant's ability to support heavy buds and improve overall yields. Supercropping is usually done during the vegetative stage, but it can also be performed early in the flowering stage if necessary. Be careful when supercropping, as it involves intentionally damaging the plant, and improper technique can lead to broken branches. And nutrient management for high yields. Feeding your plant the right nutrients is crucial for maximizing yields, especially in a confined space where soil and water can get depleted quickly. They need a balanced diet of macronutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and micronutrients, calcium, magnesium, iron, etc. to thrive. Here's how to manage nutrients effectively for a high yield grow. In the vegetative stage, we are going to need a lot of nitrogen to support healthy leaf and stem growth, and this is also essential for photosynthesis, which drives the plant's energy production. So we're going to look for a nutrient formula with a higher NPK ratio, such as a 3-1-2, to provide the necessary nutrients during this stage. In addition to nitrogen, your plants will also need calcium and magnesium to support strong cell structure and prevent nutrient deficiencies. And in the flowering stage, as your plants transition from veg, their nutrients will need to change. At this point, they'll require more phosphorus and potassium to support bud development and resin production. Phosphorus is essential for the formation of flowers, while potassium helps the overall health and strength of the plant. Look for a bloom nutrient formula with a lower nitrogen content and higher phosphorus and potassium levels, such as 132, to provide the right nutrients during this stage. You may also want to supplement with a bloom booster to enhance bud size and density. Now, to our friends in Ohio. I don't know why I get so many downloads from there compared to every other state, but I love you. Thank you. Email me if you're one of them. Contact mccpod@gmail.com. So what's going on in Ohio? Well, it became legal for recreational use from a ballot measure, and it passed by a 57 to 43 margin on November 7th, 2023. So possession and personal cultivation of cannabis became legal on December 7th, 2023. Super important to have that home grow, and I would guess that explains some of the numbers, because you're allowed to home grow on like places like Illinois, where without your medical card you can't home grow. It was first legalized back in 2016 for medical use. So again, that pattern of medical starting, and then we get that recreational later, which is a good thing, but it's sometimes a slow and painful process. But all the way back in 1975, Governor James Rhodes signed a bill decriminalizing cannabis, making Ohio the 6th state to do so. Crazy. Like, looking at some of these stats are just mind-boggling for this plant, right? In 2013, 17,000 arrests for marijuana were made in Ohio. 17,000! For something that's infinitely less harmful than alcohol. Oh, hurts my heart. And another shitty thing on here, a 2013 report by the ACLU found that in Ohio, African Americans were 4.1 more likely than Caucasians to be arrested for marijuana possession. So, just legalize it. Just legalize it. So what can we do in Ohio? We can possess up to 2.5 ounces of cannabis and 15 grams or a half ounce of concentrate for adults 21 and over. And it allows for the cultivation, which is super important, of 6 plants for personal use with a maximum of 12 plants per home. Now, baby steps, right? I'm not happy ever when there's limits imposed, because are we not free human beings? Do we have limits on the amount of cases of beer that we can have in our garage? And are those cases of beer going to cause a lot more heartache than this plant? Fucking obviously. So anyways, getting pissed off again. That's the normal part of my, the end of the segment when we get into the news and I start getting pissed off. So that's what will probably wrap this mofo up. Thank you so much for listening. Email me at contactmccpod@gmail.com. Let me know what I screwed up. Let me know what I can do better. Let me know what you liked. Let me know what you didn't like. And if you wouldn't mind giving me a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, that would help me out a lot. I said when I started this podcast I wasn't ever going to do that asking thing, but in learning more about this game, turns out that asking for that actually helps, and people don't get pissed off like I thought they would. But I wanted to save it till the very end. So if you're still sticking with me, if you could just flick a 5-star review on there real quick on your Apple Podcast app, and if you're feeling really, really nice, leaving a review, that'd be cool too. But totally get it if that's annoying and you don't want to. Love you. Bye. Have a great weekend. Talk to you soon. Peace. Later.